Hurried footsteps echoed along the corridor on the second floor, each breath coming in ragged gasps, mixing with the frantic beating of a heart. The bedroom door closed quietly, leaving only a thin line of light slicing in from the hallway. Inside, a man sat with his back against the wall, knees drawn to his chest, his gaze restless, fixed on the door as if waiting for someone or bracing for a storm that was about to break. Across the street, apartment number 9 was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of a nightlight spilling through a small window. Suddenly, his phone buzzed insistently, the screen lighting up with a familiar name. He didn't even have time to pick it up before the bedroom door swung open. A child stood silently at the threshold, hair tousled, eyes rimmed red as if something sacred had just been stolen away. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Only the faint sound of the first summer winds slipping through the gap beneath the door dared to move. The child spoke, voice hoarse and trembling, "Dad, I know." The words landed in the room like the slash of a cold blade. The man shot to his feet, wanting to explain, but his trembling hands only managed to grip each other tighter. In the corner of the room, the thin jacket of a woman he had hidden away in the closet suddenly slipped and fell to the floor, a quiet confession, a truth that needed no words. Outside, the weather had changed. Heavy rain began to beat relentlessly against the window glass, blurring everything, except for the truth that had just been laid bare. Just a year ago, Ethan was still a married man, or at least, he clung to the facade of a normal life. This old, weathered apartment marked the beginning of a series of days where he allowed himself to truly live, no longer performing for anyone else. After more than 10 years trapped in cold, distant cohabitation, he moved to a small neighborhood, choosing a ground-floor flat washed by time, its wooden door warped from snow and rain, the concrete steps moss-stained, the balcony rail dotted with flakes of peeling paint. Here, Ethan didn't hope for much. Just a sliver of peace, just enough quiet so that every morning when he opened his eyes, he could see his son still sleeping soundly on the little bed beside the window. And every night, he wouldn't have to hear complaints or feel the chill of arguments anymore. He lived quietly, simply wishing that time would be gentle enough to heal the cracks in his heart and in his child's. Every morning, Ethan woke early and brewed himself a strong black coffee, that bold, familiar flavor seeming to anchor him after so many restless nights. The pale light of dawn would sweep a silver streak across the old wooden table, filter through the voile curtains, speckled with dust, and scatter tiny, glimmering spots on the wall. He would sit by the window, watching the small street awaken beneath a thick veil of mist, listening to the occasional footsteps echoing on damp tiles, the early bus humming at the corner, the sparrows chattering in the trees that still clung to a few withered leaves. It was from that spot that Ethan first began to notice Maya. Every day, like clockwork at 7:30, Maya would appear on the porch across the street. Her thick black hair was always tied up at the nape of her neck, her face free of makeup, with delicate features and deep eyes that always seemed to carry a hint of fatigue, yet also a resilient determination. She wore a long coat, her tall, slender figure moving with purpose, always accompanied by little Emma, her daughter, with soft blonde curls, a round, lively face, bright, wide eyes, and a tiny backpack with a star on it that she clutched tightly. Emma was Alex's best friend, Alex being Ethan's son. Every morning, the two kids would meet at the steps, chatting and giggling together before heading off to the bus stop a few blocks away, their laughter rippling down the sidewalk, dispelling the cold and the quiet that always seemed to shroud the grown-ups in this neighborhood. It was always the same. Emma waving goodbye to her mother, Alex glancing back at his dad. Ethan and Maya would exchange a nod, never too familiar, but enough to acknowledge each other's presence in their separate lives. On some mornings, Maya seemed more rushed than usual, juggling grocery bags, her face beaded with sweat from a sleepless night caring for her child. Her eyes tired, but her smile still gentle for Emma. Ethan could see the shadows in Maya's gaze, the scars of a woman who had weathered many storms, strong yet so fragile, a beauty not everyone would notice amid the bustle and routine of everyday life. There were mornings when the temperature dropped suddenly and the street was blanketed in fog, the breath of passers-by drifting in little white clouds before their faces. Maya would stand close to Emma, adjusting her scarf and pulling her collar up, her hands moving quickly but always with care. The yellow streetlights spilled over Maya's long coat, casting a faint halo around her figure, and more than once Ethan caught himself watching her longer than he meant to, feeling strangely adrift as he realized how much attention he paid to every tiny gesture she made. Some mornings, Maya would suddenly turn and catch Ethan's eyes through the window. That look lasted only a second, but it carried a shyness, an awkwardness, and something tender that words couldn't quite capture. Both would smile faintly and turn away, as if they had just brushed against a forbidden place inside themselves and couldn't look away soon enough. Every morning, the small footsteps of Emma and Alex echoed along the stone path. The kids would leap over puddles left from the night's rain, their laughter soaring up into the branches, scattering the neighborhood's habitual stillness. Sometimes Alex would tease Emma with a dried leaf. Emma would feign annoyance and dash off, and Maya would call after her, unable to help but laugh at her daughter's mischievous charm. Watching them, Ethan felt a bittersweet warmth, a tenderness mixed with longing. He knew, amid the grind of responsibilities and adult burdens, people like him and Maya had long forgotten what it felt like to laugh so freely, so innocently, as children did. In the autumn mornings, when the maple leaves flamed orange and red, Maya would often choose a fitted knit dress and throw a light gray cardigan over her shoulders. Her slender figure and pale skin stood out against the gray sky. Ethan often found himself quietly observing her, from her graceful stride along the pavement to the way she would curl up on the stoop, scrolling quickly through her phone before heading inside. Sometimes, the scent of her hair would drift past on the morning breeze, faint and elusive, making Ethan's heart stumble for just a moment. There were mornings when Maya, in her rush, forgot to fasten her coat properly, exposing a glimpse of her collar and the soft skin beneath the thin fabric. Ethan knew he shouldn't stare, but couldn't help following her with his eyes. There were times, too, when Emma ran back inside to get something, leaving Maya waiting at the gate, arms crossed, her gaze far away, lips bitten gently as if hiding fatigue and silent hopes. Sometimes, Maya and Ethan would trade a few words about the kids' homework, the prices at the supermarket, or just the most basic pleasantries. But these brief exchanges were enough for Ethan to realize how much he looked forward to Maya's presence every morning. He felt acutely the emptiness in his own apartment if, for some reason, Maya and Emma didn't appear on their porch across the way. Once, on a morning of pouring rain, Maya stayed in, Emma was absent from school due to illness, and Ethan found himself at the window for hours, uneasy, as if something essential was missing from his day. Ethan's apartment was small and bright, always filled with the scent of coffee and the comforting warmth of father and son. Maya's, seen from the outside, always glowed with the green of potted plants on the balcony, the windows left ajar to welcome the sunlight and breeze. Ethan often thought that, even though their homes were only separated by a small street, even though their lives bore so many scars, there was an invisible fence of rules, fears, past hurts that kept them apart. And yet, he couldn't help wishing for the day when he might cross that street, step into Maya's world, share the burden, and maybe, just maybe, find healing together. With every passing day, these mornings became an unspoken ritual for Ethan. Waking up early, brewing coffee, quietly watching Maya and Emma, waiting for Alex and his friend to go to school. Sometimes Alex would tease, "Dad, why do you always look at Emma's house in the morning?" Ethan would just laugh, tousle his son's hair, and hide the tide of feeling rising in his chest. He knew he was caught in a kind of waiting, a longing he dared not name but couldn't deny. This steady rhythm, the exchanged glances, the shy smiles, the innocent laughter of two children outside the gate, made each morning in the small neighborhood feel a little warmer, a little more hopeful. Ethan realized it was this daily cadence that was slowly stitching back together the wounds he once thought could never heal. And perhaps in Maya's heart as well. And so, the mornings in that little neighborhood drifted by, gentle, peaceful, yet filled with a silent trembling, a quiet pulse of emotion that neither of them had ever dared to say aloud. At first, everything between Ethan and Maya was as simple as a polite nod or a faint social smile, neither of them crossing any lines, neither showing anything more than a quiet sympathy of two adults who shared the same burdens. Yet it was the repeated rhythm of those casual encounters in the hallway, the accidental meetings of their eyes in the narrow passage, the sound of doors opening and footsteps hurrying by that gradually stirred something smoldering between them, something neither dared to name. There were evenings when Emma would come over to play with Alex, and Maya would show up late to pick her daughter up. In those moments, as they stood together by the door, their conversations wandered through the smallest, most trivial things: school test scores, elementary teachers, what to cook for dinner so that Emma would eat her vegetables, or how Alex had been caught hiding comic books under his pillow. In the gentle yellow glow of the apartment hallway, Maya's voice would ring soft and light, each story half joking, half weary, colored by the experience of a woman who had learned to face every twist of fate alone. Ethan would lean against the doorframe, arms folded, sometimes smiling, sometimes just quietly responding, "Yeah," or "Really?" But his eyes always followed every little movement on Maya's face. The exhaustion at the corners of her eyes, the distant shadow in her gaze when she went silent, the fleeting, wistful smile that came when she spoke of days long past. Once, Maya told Ethan about her frantic mornings, making breakfast for Emma, checking homework, trying to squeeze in answers to work emails. "Sometimes I wish I could just be an ordinary mother, not so strong that I forget what it means to be weak," Maya said, her eyes drifting far away, her dark hair falling softly over her slender shoulder. Ethan's heart clenched at those words. He wanted to wrap Maya in a tight embrace, but didn't dare. He could only offer a silent look of understanding, a quiet nod that said more than words could ever do. On winter evenings, when cold winds howled through every gap in the building, Maya would appear in a thick coat, carrying a cloth bag dusted with flour. "I just baked some bread. If you and Alex haven't eaten dinner, please try some," she'd offer, and Ethan would accept, quietly surprised at her gentle, warm care. "Thank you, Maya. It's been a long time since I've tasted bread someone made just for me." That remark, for reasons neither could quite grasp, made Maya smile shyly, her cheeks flushed pink under the yellow light. In that moment, the space between them seemed to shrink. Just a brush of fingers, a glance that lingered a second too long, was enough for both to sense their hearts beating less steadily than before. One night, Emma lingered in Alex's room, still playing, and Maya came over late to collect her. She hesitated in the doorway as her daughter tidied up, so Ethan poured her a cup of ginger tea, the delicate aroma filling the kitchen. Maya sat on the edge of a chair, wrapping her hands around the warm mug, letting her breath curl in the steam, her gaze wandering out through the window, lost in the mottled streetlights. Her hands were slender and frail, fingers tracing the rim of the cup, hands that had once cradled a feverish child through long, anxious nights, hands that could fix a rattling window on their own every winter. Ethan looked at those hands and felt the urge to reach for them, to hold and comfort her the way a man does when he truly loves a woman. But he was afraid to upset the fragile balance they'd built. He knew that sometimes a single word could tip everything out of its careful orbit. Some days, Maya was exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from working late, her hair less perfectly kept than usual. But to Ethan, she was never more beautiful, gentle, vulnerable, touched by real life. He'd catch himself imagining Maya in a more intimate space, in his living room with her hair down, sweater slipping from her shoulder, bare feet curled under her on the sofa, her tired eyes full of trust as they met his. That thought would leave Ethan flustered, lying awake at night with a growing hunger in his chest, a longing that threatened to break past every boundary he'd built after the divorce. Then, on the coldest night of winter, Maya appeared at his door with a bowl of steaming porridge. "Eat this to keep warm, it's so cold tonight." Her voice was barely a breath. Ethan took the bowl, and as their fingers brushed, the chill of her skin mixed with a trembling warmth that shot straight to his heart. Both of them paused, their eyes locked for longer than usual, Maya's gaze deep and silent, a confession without words. Ethan managed a soft thank you and a gentle smile, but inside, he knew she'd just given him the warmest gift of his many lonely winters. From that night on, Ethan found himself yearning for each meeting, each morning, each evening, hoping for Maya's smile, her kind voice, and the faint fragrance of her skin as she leaned in to call Emma home. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. They quietly shared their private weariness, the struggles of single parenthood, and even the small secrets that only true confidants would understand. As if Ethan and Maya were gradually stepping into a realm of silent connection, where all distance faded in the presence of true feeling, and the longing for peace that two lonely souls had searched for too long. At night, the small town felt like it was covered by a thick blanket, so silent it was suffocating, with only the occasional sound of a truck passing in the distance and the faint yellow glow of scattered streetlights filtering through the mist. In his apartment, Ethan tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The curtains sometimes fluttered in the light breeze, casting patchy shadows across the walls. The early winter chill crept through every crack, seeping into his skin, but inside he felt feverish, restless in a way he couldn't soothe. Lying on his side, staring at the ceiling, Ethan tried to push Maya's image from his mind, but the more he tried, the more she haunted him. Fragments of her kept circling. Maya standing beneath the hallway light, her hair falling loose down her back, that fleeting, wistful smile, her dry lips trembling each time she shyly murmured thanks. Tonight, All Ethan's senses seemed sharpened. He could almost hear Maya's soft laughter, smell the freshly baked bread she once brought over, feel again the warmth of her hand brushing his. The emptiness, the loneliness stretching out with every breath, made him want to leap up, cross the street, and knock on Maya's door, just to ask, "Are you awake, thinking of me too?" Each night, he'd hear gentle footsteps in the hallway, sometimes after midnight. Maybe Maya was up because Emma had stirred, or maybe she too lay awake, tangled in thoughts she couldn't voice. Whenever the living room light flickered on in the apartment across the street, Ethan would quietly part his curtains, his heart racing, wondering if Maya was awake as well. He asked himself whether she ever looked his way, if she realized that with one small sign, a nod, he would have bridged that narrow distance, sat beside her, listened to her sigh, and let her rest her head on his shoulder. There were nights when, once everything was still, Ethan would sneak out of his bedroom, head for the kitchen, and pour himself a cold glass of water, trying to shake off those wandering thoughts. Yet inevitably, he would end up leaning against the windowsill, staring across at Maya's apartment. The dim yellow glow inside hinted at her presence. He'd catch glimpses of her moving, a small figure in a loose nightdress, shoulders bare, her hair simply tied up. That image was both near and far, ordinary and achingly alluring. Ethan realized he'd been drawn into a labyrinth with no exit, trapped by longing, regret, and these endless, sleepless nights. Sometimes, Maya would text Ethan very late, just a few casual lines. "Is Alex asleep yet? I have to leave early tomorrow. Could you let Emma wait with you at the bus stop?" Or sometimes just a shy emoji, an ellipsis trailing into silence. Each message made Ethan's heart warm strangely, as if, in the darkness, Maya was reaching out to share this loneliness. Once, Ethan dared to reply, "Will you be tired tomorrow? I can get some cough syrup for Emma if you need." On the other side, there would be a long pause, then just, "Thank you," followed by a tiny heart. Neither of them would say more, but Ethan knew Maya, too, was lying awake, struggling through the same restless night. Sometimes, after both children were asleep, Ethan would turn off every light except for the faint glow above the stove, standing quietly, gazing at the mist swirling beyond the window. A wild thought would pass through his mind. If only Maya would appear at his door, if only he had the courage to knock on hers, invite her to sit in his kitchen, pour her a cup of hot tea, take her hand, and let her rest her head against his shoulder without fear of judgment. But it was all just a midnight fantasy. Ethan knew both he and Maya were still clinging to the last lines of defense, afraid of being hurt again, afraid of their children's eyes, afraid of letting a desire grown strong in these sleepless nights spiral out of control. Yet it was these very nights that slowly eroded the invisible walls between them. Ethan realized that just a glance, a smile, a midnight message, was enough to make him feel less alone in this world. And deep down, he knew Maya was also waiting, for someone who truly saw her, truly longed for her, not just as a strong mother or the perfect neighbor, but as a woman yearning to be cherished, to be comforted, to burn with passion in a grown man's arms. And so, the sleepless nights quietly slipped by, drawing Ethan and Maya ever closer, nurturing between them an invisible thread that was at once sweet and dangerous. A place where, with a single moment of weakness, everything could unravel beyond their control. One night, the rain poured down in torrents, thick gray clouds blanketing the sky, the sound of raindrops drumming on tin roofs and window panes, erasing all other noises in the small city. It was close to midnight. Ethan was just about to go to bed when his phone rang. On the other end was Maya, her voice trembling and hoarse with worry. "Ethan, Emma has a high fever. I'm afraid she might have a seizure. I don't know what to do." Without a second's hesitation, Ethan grabbed his raincoat and rushed through the heavy downpour to Maya's place. The yellow light shattered on the slick stone walkway, the cold soaking through his skin and making him more alert, more urgent. Maya's apartment was pitch dark except for Emma's bedroom, where Maya sat hugging her daughter, eyes red from crying, her hand never stopping as she stroked the little girl's sweat-drenched hair. When Ethan arrived, Maya stood up shakily, her gaze clinging to him as if he were her only anchor in the stormy night. Ethan carried Emma in his arms, feeling her burning skin, her labored breathing, and the weak sobs that broke his heart. Maya hurriedly grabbed a coat, following Ethan out to the car. That night, the street felt endless. The rhythm of the windshield wipers and the rain beating on the roof drowning out all other feelings except worry, helplessness, and the silent gratitude Maya felt toward the man at her side. The hospital at night was cold and blindingly bright, with occasional announcements echoing down empty corridors, weary adults sprawled on long benches, and children curled up under thin blankets. Emma was taken to emergency. Ethan and Maya waited outside, their rain-soaked coats draped over the chairs. Maya slumped against Ethan's shoulder, her hand gripping his wrist as if even a passing breeze might shatter the fragile piece she clung to. She cried without making a sound, her tears soaking into his shirt, years of single-mother pain and fear finally spilling over. Ethan didn't ask questions, didn't offer platitudes. He simply wrapped his arm gently around Maya's thin shoulders, letting her rest against him a little longer. He could feel each tremor, each uneven breath, and the surge of emotion within himself. A mixture of tenderness, sorrow, and a fierce longing to protect, to dissolve into the loneliness Maya had hidden so long. When Emma finally stabilized, needing only fluids to bring down her fever, they both breathed easier. Near dawn, the doctor allowed them to return home. Ethan helped Maya and Emma to the car, bundling the little girl in a hospital blanket that still smelled faintly of antiseptic. On the drive back, the rain tapped steadily on the windshield, streetlights melting into smudges of gold through the wet glass. Maya sat in the back seat, Emma asleep on her lap, her head leaning against the seat, eyes gazing out the window, lost somewhere between the trauma just past and the world outside. Once home, Ethan helped Maya carry Emma inside, tucking her gently into bed. The weak light from the bedside lamp fell across Maya's face, still etched with fatigue and the tracks of tears. When everything was finally calm, the two adults stepped out onto the porch, standing together under the awning as the rain continued to fall. The cold seeped through their clothes. Maya shivered, and Ethan instinctively draped his coat over her shoulders. They stood close, quietly watching the rain. Neither spoke, only their breaths mingled with the sound of water, their skin sharing warmth in the darkness. Maya looked up at Ethan, her eyes deep, still rimmed with tears but now changed, not afraid anymore, but filled with gratitude, understanding, and a silent longing never voiced. Ethan slowly raised his hand to gently stroke her wet hair, his fingers sliding down to her cold cheek. Maya leaned into his palm, lips pressing together as if waiting for something long withheld. The first touch came from Ethan. His lips brushed softly over her forehead, then her cheek, finally resting at the corner of her mouth. Both of them trembled, unsure if it was from the cold, emotion, or the overwhelming hunger to be close that finally broke through every last barrier of reason. Maya closed her eyes, letting Ethan pull her against his chest, their breaths mingling, hearts pounding wildly in the tight space between them. The kiss came suddenly, awkward, fervent, but full of yearning. Ethan felt the softness of her lips, the scent of her skin, the taste of tears that hadn't quite dried. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him tight, her breath hitching, part sob, part relief. The kiss stretched on in the darkness and rain, as if all the loneliness, all the wounds of their lives, had at last found a place to dissolve. They said nothing, simply held each other for a long, long moment. In that fleeting time, every social boundary, every fear for tomorrow, melted away, leaving only two souls stripped bare, clinging to one another in the night's downpour. That night, when Ethan returned to his own apartment, he stood for a long while at the window, looking over at Maya's. Her room was still lit, her small silhouette cast onto the curtains, and for the first time in years, his heart brimmed with a strange, peaceful contentment, and a sweet, dangerous certainty that the walls they had built might soon be swept away. After that rainy night, everything felt upended. Ethan and Maya were no longer just two ordinary neighbors. They could no longer maintain that calm composure in every glance or morning greeting. In front of their children, they avoided each other's eyes, kept just enough distance so no one would suspect, but deep inside, both knew a silent wave of longing was rising, growing stronger with each day. The silence between them was no longer a shield, but became a sweet, intoxicating ferment. Even the lightest brush of hands made both their hearts ache, and each fleeting, secret smile was steeped in a guilty, reckless bliss. In the mornings, as Maya walked Emma to the bus stop, Ethan only dared to stand by the window, peeking through a narrow gap in the curtains. Sometimes, their eyes would meet for just a split second, enough to make both hearts skip, heavy with yearning. There were days Ethan would pass close by, and the gentle fragrance of Maya's hair made him fight not to turn and embrace her right there in broad daylight. All they could do was exchange a few hurried texts once home, short questions, little notes, as if reminding each other that this feeling was real, that there was no turning back. Night was when the world truly belonged to them. When every light had been turned off, the city hushed except for the wind rustling through the trees and the endless ticking of the clock. Ethan would lie in bed, listening to Alex's steady breathing, while Maya sat by Emma's bed, waiting for her daughter to drift into deep sleep. Only then, when both children were truly asleep, would Maya quietly put on a thin coat and slip out, crossing the cold stone path almost without touching the ground, her heart pounding with nerves, fear, and a trembling anticipation. That night, Maya stood at Ethan's door for a long moment, her finger trembling on the doorbell. As soon as he opened it, she stepped inside without a word. Ethan had been waiting, his eyes alight, hungry to devour the woman before him. No need for words, no need for explanations. Every feeling, every desire was poured into that first embrace, strong yet gentle, as if they feared a single careless touch might shatter their fragile world. They held each other tightly, breaths mingling, Maya's body flushed with heat beneath her thin, rain-damp clothes. For the first time, Ethan felt his heart race so wildly, his hands trembling at the softness of a woman he'd only ever dared imagine touching. His fingers traced down Maya's back, pausing at her waist before pulling her close, his lips searching every contour of her face, from her rain-damp forehead, her warm, soft cheeks, finally stopping at her trembling lips. Maya closed her eyes and let herself melt into Ethan's arms, her breaths coming fast, mixing with his whispered name. Ethan, Ethan. They melted into each other in the small living room, the soft golden lamplight casting a hazy, tender glow across their skin. Ethan's hands slowly unbuttoned Maya's blouse, clumsy yet reverent, as if afraid of hurting her. Maya didn't resist. Her arms circled his neck, her lips searching for the broad safety of his shoulders, leaving wet, lingering kisses. That first touch burned away every last trace of reason, drowning them both in a cocktail of guilt and bliss so sweet it was almost painful. Every caress, every stroke was intoxicating. A confirmation, a challenge, each seeking the farthest edge of longing after so many years of restraint. Ethan lifted Maya onto the sofa, her body limp and eager in his arms, her tousled hair brushing his cheek, the scent of her skin mixing with the smell of rain blowing in through the door. Her nightgown slipped off her shoulder, exposing skin so pale it glowed under the dim light. Ethan kissed along her collarbone, feeling Maya shiver, her hands clutching his back and pulling him closer, as if desperate to erase every last bit of distance. They loved each other in silence, the only soundtrack the rain drumming outside, the sweet guilt, and an unrestrainable hunger. Maya arched into Ethan, biting her lip to stifle any cry that might alert the neighbors, her eyes brimming with tears, part emotion, part perfect release. Ethan whispered Maya's name over and over, each thrust making him more intoxicated, more certain this need could never be satisfied. Their bodies tangled, sometimes moving slow, sometimes frantic, then slowing again, stretching out the pleasure of this first, complete union after so many nights of secret longing. When every desire finally reached its peak, Maya bit down gently on Ethan's shoulder, surrendering herself completely in his arms. The first man who had ever made her feel so utterly herself, allowed to be weak, wild, and alive, without a thought for tomorrow. Afterward, they lay side by side for a long while, breath mingling, hands entwined, neither willing to let go. Ethan buried his face in Maya's hair, murmuring prayers that the night would never end. Maya laughed softly through her tears, realizing she had just crossed every line, lost, and found herself all at once in the arms of a man who had survived his own storms. From that night on, there was a secret between them, a hunger that only burned hotter, a sweet, hidden guilt in every glance, every accidental brush of the hand. And from then on, there was no turning back. In the days that followed, time itself seemed to slow. The air inside Ethan's small apartment and in Maya's house across the street took on a strange, delicate stillness, like the surface of a pond that shows no ripple, though underneath a powerful current churned unseen. Both of them played the responsible adult roles in front of their children, in front of neighbors, or any passing glance. They learned to keep their storms of feeling on a tight leash, reserving their true selves for the late hours, when the night had finally swallowed the noise and rush of the day. During the day, Ethan was just the calm, devoted single father, helping Alex with homework, cleaning up the house, squeezing in remote work between making dinner. Yet beneath that calm exterior, 1,000 furtive thoughts spun wild, especially whenever Maya appeared at his door, sometimes just to hand Emma a forgotten workbook, sometimes to borrow a cup of sugar or to ask about a car just washed. Just a fleeting glance in the kitchen, a slow, hesitant smile, and both would know how much effort it took to hold themselves back. On late afternoons, golden light would angle in through the window, catching the honey brown of Maya's hair. Ethan would quietly watch from a distance, a surge of longing for the nights past swelling inside him. Just a glimpse of her slim shoulders or the way her slender fingers folded Emma's shirts, and Ethan would be flooded with memories of Maya's soft skin beneath his hands, the little moans she bit back, the scent and salty taste of her neck in the darkness, making his entire body flare up with a hunger that never left. Once, Maya sent him a brief message, just one line. "Last night, I kept remembering what it felt like to be held by you." Ethan read and reread it, his fingertip on the screen as if caressing Maya's bare skin. Sometimes, catching her in the stairwell, their breaths would mingle for an instant, the faint perfume in the air enough to make Ethan's heart stutter. Their hands brushed briefly when handing Emma's things back and forth, a single look lasting longer than a heartbeat, the air between them sizzling though they had to pretend nothing was amiss. At night, with all the apartments around gone dark, Ethan lay awake in bed, body still marked by the hunger of the night before. He remembered every curve of Maya's body, the tight grip when she let him dive deep into her loneliness, her quickened breath each time he kissed her shoulder or nape. Sometimes he wondered if it was the secrecy, the danger, that made their desire burn so bright, as if every touch was a delirious escape, with no thought for what tomorrow might bring. Maya couldn't hide her longing, either. Watching Ethan joke with Alex in the yard or water the plants on his porch, she couldn't restrain her eyes, brimming with want. In her short daydreams before dusk, she would feel again his hand trailing down her back, his voice whispering her name in the dark, the weight of his body pressing her into the sofa or the warm mattress. Occasionally, she'd unconsciously touch her chest in the middle of the day, quietly recalling the sensation of her body pressed against his. Two beings fused behind drawn curtains. The craving only grew, like magma simmering beneath the earth, always threatening to erupt. One evening at dinner, Alex joked, "Emma's mom is always borrowing stuff from us," and Ethan and Maya exchanged a secret look, both swallowing guilty smiles. The quieter they tried to be, the more obsessed they became. Sometimes Ethan would sit alone in the dark living room, picturing Maya's body, replaying her little cries in his mind, feeling her warmth lingering on his pillow and sheets. Sometimes just that was enough to make him tremble with longing. For Maya, it became impossible to imagine life without those tight embraces, the reckless passion under the dim lamplight. A single glance from Ethan and her whole body would shiver, feeling small and vulnerable, craving his protection and indulgence, no matter the rules or what people might think. After Emma fell asleep, Maya would often hold herself, imagining Ethan's hand stroking her, his face buried in her hair, whispering words of love she'd waited so long to hear. So in those quiet days, both Ethan and Maya wore two faces, one for the outside world and one for each other, overflowing with desire, guilt, happiness, and a trembling fear. But those feelings, neither wanted to nor could let go anymore. That morning began like any other, but something in the air felt thick, quietly warning of something both secret and burning about to happen. Ethan was still in his thin pajamas, hair slightly tousled, standing in the small kitchen where the first rays of sun had just started to shine through the misty window pane. The scent of hot coffee wafted through the air, blending with the smell of freshly baked bread, bringing a familiar peace. A peace Ethan knew was only the surface, masking the deep, churning waves inside him. There was a soft knock at the door. Maya appeared, wearing a long sweater that fell past her knees, her loose curls spilling over her shoulders, those deep black eyes lit with a restless glimmer she couldn't quite hide. She smiled gently, her cheeks flushed as if the cold morning air outside had just touched her. Emma ran out of milk. "I came over to ask for some for her breakfast," Maya said softly, her gaze searching his as if asking, as if inviting, as if the slightest sign would bring every barrier crashing down. Now the little kitchen belonged only to the two adults. The children were still dozing in their rooms. Everything was so still that Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, the rise and fall of Maya's breath as she stood by the counter. He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly set down his coffee cup and stepped closer. His breath brushed the skin of her neck as his arms circled her slender waist through the soft wool. Maya tilted her face up, lips parting for that first gentle touch. Her hesitation vanished the instant Ethan bent and pressed his mouth to her skin, lips traveling along her neck, the early morning scent of her making both their minds foggy with need. The kiss was hurried and wild. Ethan pulled Maya tight against his chest, his hand trailing down her back, slipping beneath her sweater to feel the smooth warmth of her skin, that feverish heat pulsing like fire in their veins. Maya clung to him, arms winding behind his neck, pulling Ethan down harder, her whole body pressing up against his. Their breaths tangled together, urgent and hungry, Maya's hand running down Ethan's back, gripping him as if to make this moment last as long as possible. It all happened in a whirlwind, fast and breathless. Ethan's lips roamed along Maya's neck, down to her bare shoulder, his fingers pushing the fabric aside, grazing along her waist, finding the most sensitive places. Maya shivered, her legs almost melting beneath her, eyes fluttering half-closed in that brief morning haze of pleasure before she was even fully awake. Their scents, hers and his, mixed with coffee and bread, creating a heady perfume only the two of them could feel. In that moment, every trace of logic and every fear about tomorrow disappeared. All that remained was the need to live honestly, to touch each other with no limits, to hear the little muffled moans swallowed in the back of the throat, to feel lips trembling and damp with desire. But then, from the bedroom, came the sounds of the children's footsteps padding across the wooden floor. Maya quickly pulled away, both of them hastily straightening their clothes, smoothing their hair, each taking a deep breath to steady their racing pulses. Their hearts were still thundering, breaths barely under control, their eyes meeting in a long look heavy with meaning, tinged with the sweet guilt that was impossible to hide. Maya smiled softly, took the carton of milk from Ethan, her lips still a little swollen from the hurried kiss. "Thank you," was all she said, then turned and left the kitchen, her slender figure disappearing down the sunlit hallway. Ethan stood motionless in the kitchen for a long time, chest still rising and falling, the taste of her kiss, the scent of Maya's skin lingering on his fingertips and mouth. He knew that from now on, every morning would be a guilty morning. A single glance, a single touch, and the hunger would flare up again, fiercer and deeper each time, like the craving of souls too long denied a taste of real, living connection. But then, no secret can remain hidden forever beneath a veneer of silence. That night, the city seemed to stop under a thick veil of fog, every sound fading into the distance, so that it felt like the whole world existed only within the four small walls of Ethan's apartment. Emma, Maya's daughter, was sleeping over at Ethan's, the two children sharing a room, their steady breaths and innocent, carefree sleep just like all children after a day filled with play and laughter. As for Maya, though she had promised herself not to cross the line, when night fell and the room grew empty, her heart restless and anxious, She could not resist the urge to seek out Ethan. Quietly slipping out of the bedroom, Maya crept along the hallway, each step on the wooden floor echoing louder in the darkness. Ethan's room was lit only by the small bedside lamp, its warm orange-yellow light spilling gently across the wall, casting trembling shadows that seemed to mirror the turmoil in both their hearts. Maya entered, saying nothing. Her eyes spoke 1,000 words. Ethan sat up, opened his arms wide, and pulled her close without the need for any questions. That familiar intimacy, the scent of her hair, the warmth of her breath, washed over them both like a rushing tide, giving neither a chance to resist. They clung to each other in the darkness, kisses both hurried and saturated with longing. Ethan's hands traveled every curve of Maya's body, caressing every part he had dreamed of. Maya arched her neck to meet his lips, her hands gripping his strong shoulders, her body soft and bare in the cold moonlight spilling through the curtains. Her breath grew ragged, soft moans stifled between her teeth, shy yet searing, unable to be hidden. Their bodies moved in harmony, pouring all their longing, waiting, and unspoken fear about tomorrow into that feverish, unstoppable rhythm. On sweat-damp sheets, Maya lay with her head resting on Ethan's chest, her tangled hair spilling across his shoulder, their fingers entwined as if letting go would make it all vanish. The moonlight shone quietly through the window, illuminating Maya's pale skin, the red marks along her back, and Ethan's damp, bare shoulders. The smell of skin and desire mingled with the midnight air, a dangerous fragrance that intoxicated and made the heart tremble. And at that very moment, there was a faint sound in the hallway. Ethan's son, Alex, had unexpectedly awakened from a nightmare and gone looking for his father. He stood frozen outside Ethan's bedroom door, still clutching the corner of his blanket, eyes wide with shock as he saw, through the partly open door, his best friend's mother. Maya lying on his father's chest, the two adults tangled together, lost in each other beneath the pale moonlight. Alex made no sound, no cry. He just stood there, eyes wide and brimming with tears, his body stiff with adolescent shock. The scene burned itself into his memory, impossible for any explanation to erase. Quietly, Alex turned away, stepped softly back to his room, tears rolling down his cheeks. Not knowing if the pain was from hurt, from jealousy, or from the crushing realization that his world was no longer the same. Ethan and Maya, still lost in their own world, remained completely unaware that their secret had just been exposed. And from that moment on, every line had been crossed, and the consequences were already waiting beyond the fragile threshold of love and morality. The next morning, everything felt as if it had turned into a cold, thick puddle, pressing down on every breath inside the small apartment. Alex sat across from Ethan, his eyes swollen, red, and dry from crying. Emma huddled beside her mother, no longer chattering or laughing as she usually did. Maya avoided the children's eyes, her hand trembling as she poured milk, her thin fingers gripping the cup as if afraid it would shatter. Ethan looked at his son, his throat tight, every word he wanted to say stuck inside. He couldn't explain, didn't have the courage to confess, and had no idea how to make up for the pain that had just been kindled in the hearts of the children. The heavy air dragged on through every movement. The sound of spoons clinking against bowls felt icy and hollow. No one asked questions, no one spoke. They all felt like strangers living under the same roof, breathing the same air, but belonging to different worlds. Every time Maya accidentally looked at Ethan, she quickly turned away, her eyes empty and confused. filled with the panic of someone who has just lost something immense that can never be reclaimed. In the days that followed, the children avoided the adults. Emma found ways to go home early, no longer visiting Ethan's apartment as before. Alex grew silent and withdrawn, skipping meals, locking himself in his room for hours, only opening the door when absolutely necessary. Ethan's heart ached every time he heard his son softly crying behind the closed door, but he could only stand silently in the hallway, hand gripping the doorknob without the courage to open it. Both Maya and Ethan were consumed by guilt. In the nights that followed, each curled up in the darkness, listening to the wind rattling the windows, the slow ticking of the clock. Every moment, every sound seemed to recall those nights of secret passion, those longing kisses that now left only a bitter aftertaste on their lips. One evening, a steady rain fell over the city, the sky darkening as if to hide everything. Ethan sat alone in the living room, the weak yellow lamp barely lighting one corner of the couch, his shadow stretched long across the gray tile floor. Maya quietly entered. Neither spoke, only the sound of rain tapping the window and the slow ticking of the wall clock filling the room, drawing out the ache inside them. They sat side by side on the sofa, a witness to so many nights of longing, now the place where every last hope was buried. Ethan placed his hand on Maya's knee, his hand trembling and hot, knowing he was about to let go for real. He looked straight into her eyes, still glistening with tears, deep and lost in despair. "Maybe we should stop," he whispered, his voice heavy as lead, carrying every regret, every bit of remorse, and the helplessness of a man who cannot protect happiness for either of them. Maya bit her lip, tears streaming down her cheeks, dripping onto her chin. She didn't bother to wipe them away. She said nothing, just nodded faintly, her eyes drained, quietly gazing at the floor as if everything inside her had collapsed. They sat together for a long time, not touching, not crying aloud, just letting the rain outside fall heavier and heavier, blending into a thick atmosphere of sorrow. In that moment, Ethan knew that the love between him and Maya, no matter how fierce or true, could never survive the wounded, disappointed eyes of their children, nor defy the unspoken rules of the world outside. All that remained was heartbreak, the pain of choosing between private happiness and the responsibility of being a parent. And he understood that Maya was hurting too, swallowing her tears, burying her love deep down, trading it for a little piece for the children she loved more than anything. That night, the small house felt emptier than ever. Ethan sat alone in the dark, listening to the rain, feeling the pain seep into every fiber of his body, knowing he had just lost not only the woman he desired most in this life, but also his last chance to truly live according to his own heart. In the weeks after the breakup, Ethan and Maya's lives felt frozen, each day dragging by slowly, heavily. They tried to fulfill their roles as parents. Ethan devoted himself to Alex, taking him to school, cooking, asking about his homework. Maya poured all her attention into Emma, patiently listening, comforting her, doing her best to seem strong as if she had never known weakness. The two adults chose silence, keeping their distance almost mechanically, exchanging only bland greetings in the hallway or text messages about the children's schoolwork. Neither dared to reveal the storm of emotion still raging inside. But at night, when all the walls of society, duty, and morality fell away, both Ethan and Maya found themselves reliving wounds that had not yet healed. Ethan lay awake on his familiar bed, turned away, staring at the ceiling, trying to push away the memory of Maya's soft skin, the grip of her hands on his shoulders, the faint moans still echoing in his ear. Yet the more he tried to forget, the more vivid everything became. The scent of her hair on his pillow, the light scratches down his back, the sweet and salty taste lingering on his lips. Whenever Alex was sound asleep, Ethan would find himself unconsciously standing by the window, gazing across the street at Maya's apartment, where her light was often still burning, wondering if she, too, was lying awake, missing him. The loneliness they both felt didn't wear down with time. It only left them more exhausted, more hungry for something they could no longer have. More than once, Ethan found himself staring at his phone, typing out messages for Maya. "I miss you. Are you okay? Just one more hug." But every time, those words were deleted before they were sent, replaced by silence and the paralyzing fear of hurting their beloved children again. Some nights, Maya couldn't bear the loneliness either, curled up on the sofa, clutching a pillow as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. Just a message, just a call from Ethan, and she would have been willing to throw it all away, to run into his arms, to forget every rule and every expectation of the adult world. But then, the sound of Emma sighing in her sleep, or the shadow of Alex passing by the living room window, would pull Maya back to reality. She reminded herself to be strong, to protect Emma's childhood, to give Alex a reason to trust adults, even as her own heart bled a little more each day. Sometimes they would run into each other at the bottom of the stairs in the fading afternoon light. Just a glance, and all the bottled-up feelings would surge up in an instant. Sometimes all it took was a quiet, "Are you doing okay?" to make Maya's heart tremble. More than once, Maya almost reached out to touch Ethan, almost confessed that she couldn't live without him. More than once, Ethan wanted to cast aside everything and hold Maya tight, loving her as if it were the last time. But the fear, the haunting memory of their children's pain, always pulled them back to their responsibilities, leaving every desire unfulfilled, every hope suspended. And so, the two adults continued living side by side, loving each other in silence, carrying wounds that grew deeper and sharper every day, never selfish enough to choose their own happiness. They chose morality, responsibility, and what was best for their children, even as their own hearts withered a little more each day. And in this pain, Ethan and Maya came to understand the full weight and the cruel price of what it means to choose as an adult. A place where love is not enough to bring two people together, and happiness and morality do not always travel on the same, straight path. One summer morning, the small street was awash in sunlight, no longer veiled in the old, familiar mist. The children were grown now. Alex and Emma were no longer the innocent kids chattering beneath the eaves, but teenagers who understood, who could see and sense the hidden stories behind the eyes of adults. Ethan stepped down the old concrete steps, their tiny cracks marking the passage of years, steps where he and Maya once waited for their children every morning. He looked quietly across the street. Maya had just opened her door, her hair still softly curled as always, but her eyes were different now. No longer clouded with sorrow, but calm, serene in a way that felt new. They exchanged a glance, lasting only the length of a single breath, not haunted, not burning with old passion, not carrying any more guilt. Just two grown souls, having weathered every storm, standing in the stillness of dawn after a long, dark night. Alex squeezed his father's hand, the other holding a book, his gaze lifting to Ethan's face with deep understanding. "Dad, I want you to be happy." The words were soft, but pierced all the layers of his father's heart, years spent torn between duty and the longing to live honestly. Emma stood beside her mother, her lips curved in a gentle smile, free of childish jealousy or the caution of years past. She touched Maya's hand, a silent comfort, letting her know that wounds would heal, that even love which doesn't reach its destination can leave behind the very best for each other. Maya and Ethan, two adults who had completed the labyrinth of emotion, lived out their passions, succumbed to temptation, suffered, and wept through so many silent nights. Now understood that sometimes the hardest thing isn't coming together, but letting go at the right moment. To keep for each other a little peace, the most beautiful memories. They stood on the doorstep, under the golden summer sunlight, facing each other as neighbors, no longer sharing secret touches or hurried kisses under the dim lamp. Only a nod, a gentle smile, and eyes close enough to understand, distant enough to never wound each other again. Ethan smiled, feeling a weight lift from his heart. He knew Maya felt the same. The children walked away, the street fell silent again, but the space between their two homes was no longer a border, but a gentle pause, room enough for hearts to rest after all they had weathered. They would continue with their lives, still neighbors, still able to greet each other each morning. No more fear, no more hiding, no more desperate longing. Only a quiet respect, a gentle love, enough for each to face the days ahead with new strength. And that, perhaps, is the greatest happiness that two grown souls, who have known heartbreak, loved deeply, and chosen sacrifice, can ever give to one another.